5 plugin that defines a text area. And I'm coming up blank.
Yeah, Image's not calculated. Haven't even added there yet.
I mean, frankly, if you've gotten to the point where you can get a text field showing
Yeah.
up in your
Yeah.
CKEditor 5 plugin, I would pat yourself on the back and use the text
I know,
field,
yeah,
to be
I know.
perfectly honest with you.
I'm with you. It's taken so long just to get that far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, CKEditor 5 is a really large open source project. Like, learning to develop for it is kind of like learning to develop for Drupal. It's a lot, you know? And for CKEditor 4, I didn't do a lot of CKEditor 4 work, but the work that I did do was singularly uncomplicated compared to all this. And yet it is a good architecture. Like, I really like what they've done with CKEditor 5. Like, the whole plugin architecture is like, it's really, really kind of slick. And the usual way that you divide it up into, you know, here's your command, your model, and your view and everything, that stuff's kind of slick. But it's a lot. I'm with you. Yeah.
So, like stability, like, stability is probably the wrong word. So I recently had a real painful upgrade from Drupal 9 to 10 because of CKEditor.
We also had that pain,
Yeah,
yes.
And like, you know, basically we ended up, this client doesn't matter who it was, but they were very specific about the authoring experience.
Yeah.
It ended up being a blocker for us. That and
Yeah.
the off-canvas refactor was another thing.
Yeah.
Did you deal with that ever? No?
We did not have any off-canvas stuff that we were doing in 9. So,
Yeah.
like, I've seen people like with horror stories about it, but I
there's
haven't
just a lot
had
of
that pain myself.
themes and models that relied on it that hadn't caught up to it yet. And,
Yeah.
You know, anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did have to like redo like a lot of the. We had to rebuild like what's the future of CK5 editor? Do you know what their? How long are we good to build on this? Without breaking changes. You know?
Yeah, I mean, my impression is that the 4 to 5 change for them is as significant as the 7 to 8 change was for us.
If that's a good analogy of it, then
I believe.
then I will go ahead and relax and build on 5.
I think that's safe.
Okay.
I think we're good to go. Now, do I speak for CKEditor? Like,
No.
I obviously don't. Do I know anything? Maybe not. But I know that architecture change was at least as big as ours, possibly bigger. I don't think they're planning to do that again. I really don't. And there's been a lot of pain. Like, if you are in their issue queue over on GitHub or whatever, like, people are suffering, right? I don't think that the company behind CKEditor is planning to do this again very soon. I think we're good to go.
Awesome. Cool.
So, for what it's worth. Yeah.
Well, is there a future with alternatives to CKEditor 5 for Drupal?
That is a
There's
really
still
good question.
A bunch of stuff out there.
I mean, we seriously considered just doing the long-term support version of CKEditor 4.
Yeah.
We eventually decided, you know, eventually we're going to have to upgrade here, which is one of the things that happens when you've got a site that's super old and it's stuck with Drupal and it's going to continue to stick with Drupal. It's not like you can be like, well, you know, they might migrate this whole site to, I don't know, Adobe Experience Manager or something, and we won't have to worry about it, right? We're probably going to have to worry about it, so we went ahead and did it. But we absolutely considered CKEditor for long-term support. There were some interesting sessions at DrupalCon Portland. Were you there? Did you catch any of that?
There was one, I can't remember what the editor was, but it promised that you could do real-time edits in collaboration, and it used a different.
Yeah,
I
that
feel
was
like I saw
Palantir's
that
project.
somewhere.
Yeah.
CKEditor 5, I think. With the root
I can't. What is it?
CKEditor 5 has a feature for that. But I think
Is that yeah, it's a
feature.
premium feature. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's two options. You've got the CKEditor 5 premium plugin that does that, and then you've got entirely outside of CKEditor, you've got I forget the name of the Palantir project, but they're the ones behind it.
That's right.
Yeah. And I mean, do you remember why we decided not to go with that? There was some deal breaker for us with that. Because we went to that session, or you went to it, and we were like, this is really cool. And it didn't support something important. Was it revisions, or I don't think it was. I mean, man, you know, we actually don't use Layout Builder, so it wouldn't have been that. I don't know if it supports it.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Yeah.
there was some important thing that we were like, oh, well, if I can't support that, we can't deal with it. I don't know what it was. I mean, if you're asking for my personal opinion about like what is the future of this stuff, I think it's CKEditor 5. I think that's the direction we're going. Obviously, Palantir has an interest in promoting their alternative. As a general rule, I think an alternative would be great. I don't love seeing lock-in or whatever, but CKEditor 5 is really good, right? It's just really slick, and anything you can do in there, someone's eventually going to do it, right? And I think part of the pain that we're suffering in the Drupal project with it right now is that it's fairly new, and stuff just doesn't exist, right? We had things all figured out in 4, and 5 comes along, and people are like, well, I don't know how to upgrade my plugin from 4 to 5, so I'm just not going to do it. And it's like, oh, but I needed that plugin. I do think we'll eventually get there, and everything will be brought over. I think that's the future of it. But that's just my totally off the cuff opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Any other questions? Anything that you want to go back over and maybe like look at? We actually have, what do we got, like another 20 minutes? Yeah. So we do have time to look at some details, or we can take that nap that we promised ourselves after lunch. Either way, it's fine with me.
Can you share what you actually made?
Well, yes.
Or are working on?
Kind of. Well, I did finish it, and we shipped it like to our customer. It's really odd having one customer. I have like 2 sites that I care about. So it's kind of an odd way to work. Let's see here. So I'm having problems finding my mouse cursor. It's in odd places. We'll drag this over here. No, I didn't really want it right there. Yeah. Might be legible. See if I remember to change the README that I was talking about. Oh, I did remember to change it. Look at me. So what we needed sounded really simple. It was little bitty icons in line in the text. So for help.smartsheet.com, we're documenting how to use the Smartsheet tool, and it's got little buttons that you can use. And so we needed a picture of the button in line with the text, and we could do that in CKEditor 4. And suddenly we were unable to do it in CKEditor 5 with Drupal 10, and they're like, hey, fix it. Yeah. So 2 months later, I had it fixed. So this module I have not contributed because it requires a core patch, because core doesn't even allow inline images at all, much less the specific need that we had to make them into links with specific text. So first I had to figure out if the core patch was usable, which it was. That issue is going good places. And then I had to figure out how to modify that patch such that I could then write a custom module that could plug into it and do stuff with the Drupal media inline. So all that to say that I haven't contributed this. If I did contribute it, I think it would just confuse people. I am hoping that the issue here, let's actually see how that issue is going.
So is it like an inline tooltip?
It is not exactly a tooltip. It's more of a link. Well, we needed it for two different things. We had a need for it on just www.smartsheet.com for one particular thing, and we needed it on the help site for a different thing. On the help site, I think we do just have tooltips, right? I mean, yeah. So we just used the patch straight up on help. On our www site, we needed to be able to embed media objects as a link. So if you go to, what is one of our integrated content? I can't even remember if we've got, I was looking at old ancient versions of the site for my other talk. Let's see.
Yeah,
All right.
we did this in Drupal 7 and,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Right,
this
you-
is not a
you
problem.
use the media plugin
Was-
that you wanted,
Not a problem.
right, and it's like a display mode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's what I needed to be able to do here. So we provide this like, okay, here's info for randomly people on the web about Gantt charts. Here's how they work, and we're like, here's an Excel template that you can download if you're using Excel, or if you're really cool and you use Smartsheet, you can just click here and start a trial. And don't you want to do that? But if you do want it, here's the Excel template. And so what we needed to be able to do, it would be easier if I actually showed you this. So I'm logging into my production site. That never goes badly. All right. Okay. So what I wanted to be able to do was this. So I wanted to be able to choose my view mode if needed. The view mode in this case is just a link. Export it as a link, some text, right? So if I go to source here, what I'm actually inserting is a Drupal media inline. Is that legible enough?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. So the core with this patch does all of this. That's all fine, except for the data link text. My users needed to be able to specify Excel template. This is the kind of link that we're embedding, right? This is going to be an Excel template. So they needed to be able to specify that text in case it was, some custom thing. And then have it render as just a link. So there's a view mode involved, and then there's some pre-process that I have to do to get the actual data link text attribute to show up as the text of the link. And so the CKEditor plugin that I wrote is what makes this button pop up. Luckily, there was already a little pencil icon because I didn't want to have to create one. So this lets you set the link text for the media item. So if we wanted to change the link text, we could do that. And it's interesting because that change is really fast, but it involves a round trip to the server, to Drupal, saying, hey, we just changed the data link text attribute, and the Drupal media plugin, the server-side part of that, returns back, okay, here is the new HTML for your Drupal media inline object. If you've worked enough with CKEditor 5, you know that there's a model and a view for it. And the view is essentially the HTML that shows up when you are in source mode, when you click. This is essentially the view. It turns out there are actually two different views. There's one for the HTML that shows up, and there's one for if you need highlight to appear inside the text area, there's one for that, and there's one for the actual end user view for it. So it's slightly more complicated than just one view. But essentially, this is the view, this HTML, or almost HTML, and the model is almost like a DOM. It is a representation of this stuff here. And so you figure out in your plugin, you figure out the view or whatever, and then you send that to Drupal, and Drupal says, oh right, this is something that I'm actually going to change with a filter, right? In the text format, you might have a filter set up that's going to change that HTML. So CKEditor gives Drupal, here's the HTML, and Drupal says, here's the real HTML, and does the replacing of Drupal media in line with some actual HTML that shows up here. And you can see my font awesome integration is incomplete. I think after I had finished spending a couple of months on this, I was like, do you need the icons to be correct inside of CKEditor, or can the authors deal with that? And they're like, oh, that's fine, this works great. I was really relieved. So, so this is what that does, and I can show you, maybe. I can show you what I ended up with here. So we have all your standard, like the CKEditor 5 YAML, which just tells Drupal, well, it tells CKEditor 5, hey, that DLL thing where you can link in new packages, here's the package, link this in. And then it tells Drupal, hey, when someone is setting up a text format and they're editing the CKEditor stuff and they want to decide which CKEditor buttons are available, here's a button that they can choose to include. And it's only available if you're using the Drupal Media CKEditor plugin. Here are the elements that need to be available. And this is actually, maybe, no, it's not an error. Okay, I was going to say, so when you are defining your plugin and you're making a new element available, say you're writing a plugin to make the I element available. That there isn't one, right? Because everyone's using EM. But if you need I for Font Awesome or something, you might have to write a plugin. Someone's going to have to write a plugin. Someone was just complaining the other day there isn't one available. I don't remember. Maybe they got it to work. Anyway, if you say you're writing such a plugin, you have to, in this elements bit for Drupal, you have to say, hey, I is now an element that someone can put into a text area and not get an error. Like, this is a valid element. And then if you are allowing attributes on that element, you need to, on a separate line, define, okay, I with the class attribute is also valid. And they could add, you know, maybe you're defining a data something element, a data something attribute for your element. You would need to specify that on this in this Drupal elements section as well. So this is the CKEditor 5 YAML. This takes the place of a PHP file. If you wanted to, you could replace this CKEditor 5.yaml with a PHP plugin that would have an annotation at the top that would make all of this same information available. But if you can do it in a YAML, why not do it in a YAML? So that's mostly what people do. So that's the CKEditor 5 bit. In libraries, I do have to tell it, look, the final built version of my thing is at medialinktext.js. Do please include it. And I need CKEditor 5 available as well. And then this library I make available on the admin side. And then the actual meat of my plugin. The build directory is obviously where the build stuff ends up. And you do ship that because that Webpack is generating the contents of build. And obviously, people using this module are not necessarily going to be doing a Webpack build. So you do the Webpack build, you ship the contents of build. The source is inside of CKEditor 5 plugins. This module, this Drupal module, if it wanted to, could make a whole bunch of different plugins available. It was lucky to make one available, frankly. But if you were doing multiple, you would stick them all in directories in here. The media link text plugin. Oh yes, of course it has a source folder because everything has to have a source folder. Okay, so here's what I was talking about where the anatomy of a CKEditor 5 plugin is. It has a command section, it has an editing section, it has a UI section, it can have different pieces. And so when you go through that tutorial that I was recommending, you'll learn how to write those individual pieces. The Webpack config that comes with this template in the CKEditor 5 dev Drupal module. So if you look at the index.js, the build always expects an index.js. You could actually put all of your stuff that you were writing into this index.js. So if you're the kind of person who really just wants to do one JavaScript file, here's your one chance. You can stick everything in index.js. Or you can do it the way that it's already set up. And honestly, it is a little easier if you divide it into more maintainable files. So all this does is say, hey, I've got a thing available in medialinktext.js. So medialinktext.js. This is what CKEditor refers to as a master or glue plugin. Its purpose is to integrate all the separate parts of the plugin before it's made discoverable via index.js. This feels to me like at least one layer more than we actually need. But I was not going to mess with it because it would have meant changing things in the Webpack config. And if there's something that I don't want to do with my time, it's change things in the Webpack config that is already working. So I just went with it. And this is where you tell it, hey, I have an editing, I forget what they're called. I think they're actually called plugins. I think this plugin is glue for several other separate plugins. So I have an editing plugin, I have a UI plugin, I have a command plugin. And this is where I tell CKEditor, or I tell Webpack, here are my plugins. And then, no, we're not CDing, that's why it won't work. It knows better than I do. So when we were talking about making a text area available in a dialog that pops up, this is where you define your dialog in the first place, in a UI plugin. You tell it, there's a button that I need available. This is what would go in the Drupal media thing. And there's a form that I need available. I define the button. I bind it to, here's when the button is enabled. Here's where it's not. And here's the form that we're defining. Render the form. When you hit submit on the form, you hide the form. I find that trying to modify someone else's CKEditor 5 plugin is really kind of hard because you have to figure out what every single line of code does. When you're starting them from scratch, just following the tutorial or whatever, it really is way simpler. So I recommend writing your own tutorial size plugin first, following one of they've got multiple tutorials for plugins. I really recommend writing them first, and then when you go look at someone else's, it makes a lot more sense, because the first time I looked at the Drupal media CKEditor plugin, because that's the thing I needed to modify, right? So I'll just go look at that and see how it's built, and it was really overwhelming, and it didn't make sense until I had written one of my own. So, yeah, this is all of the code that's needed to manage the actual dialogue that pops up. And like I say, I have no idea how I would make a text editor, like a text area, work in here, because I could see that getting mixed up with, CKEditor 5 needs to manage all the text areas on the page. I could see where that could cause a problem. So anyway, yeah, that's the UI. There's also the editing plugin and the command plugin, and I will spare you the details on that. Like I say, I have not contributed this. I possibly should. I definitely should if the Drupal media inline merge request gets in. After that exists, I'll go ahead and push this up because it might actually make sense to use at that point. But there are lots of good examples out there. If you would just want to see how are people doing bridge modules, there's a bunch of plugin modules that you can go look at. They're doing good work. Yeah.
Is the core patch you mentioned, is that necessary when you're adding on to an existing core plugin, or is it not related?
If you're adding on to an existing core plugin, then you are the one patching core.
Yeah.
So in my case, what I needed to do was modify the existing patch to add some functionality. If in general you are just wanting to modify some CKEditor 5 stuff that's not related to inline Drupal media, then you don't need the thing that I was talking about. That was just specific for my problem. Okay. I think that's the time we have. All right, thanks.
Thank you.